ceremony was the burning bowl ceremony was just last week. And so even for any of you that weren't here, if you're connected in with the energy of the community, some of those kinds of things that we're doing are still occurring. And one of the things that we've noticed through teaching courses and like the next step courses and the 12 heavens is that the things that we are working with energetically, they show up even though like right here, right now, we are in a specific time and moment to be doing this work and talking about these things. The energy works with us already before what we're doing and after, and sometimes it's in retrospect that you go, oh, that's what that was. So the other part of it that, Robyn, you can probably talk about a little bit better is that Pluto is moving into Aquarius. And we think of that as, one day next week, but the energy is building and will continue to build. I do know for myself that typically I feel the shift even on the day, sometimes of these really big planetary transits that occur, but also, they definitely come in well before the actual day of the change. So there's lots going on. And, this month, and really starting, well, for me, energetically, like how the process has been going here in the Distance Reiki Share, because we do have like topics that show up that we talk about and then go through like a month-long discussion about those topics and how we use Reiki for them. So for me, this stream of things that we've been talking about is living authentically and discovering your unique path. And that started back when we did the eagle and mouse vision journey. And that kind of started the process. And then, of course, we had the holidays and we had real life things to talk about. But it's all this subject of living authentically and what does that mean to you? And so many of us are, like for me, I think most of us, it's a process of self-discovery and what that actually even means. Like what do I mean when I think, okay, in our work, we're always talking about being our authentic self. So a big question for me is, what does that mean? And how is that true for me? And then what this shows us is that, of course, it's your own unique path because it's different for everybody. What does that mean to be in your authentic self? And then to take that to living your life authentically. And so we've been working on that whole subject and developing that subject and talking about it and talking about how we use Reiki with it. And so there's been the process of success consciousness. And what does success mean to you? And on all the different multidimensional levels of who you are, like, really who you are. And, what does success mean to you spiritually, personally? What does it mean to you financially, relationship-wise? So there's all these different categories that we also look at, because ultimately Reiki is a very practical energy. It really helps you gain clarity, solutions, and focus, even if you're unfocused, even if you're not feeling that way, or even if things are very scattered, it can help you, kind of bring your discernment together in practical ways that are helpful for your daily life. So we talked about success consciousness and really listening to what that means for you, because it's different for each of us. And for each of us, it's different in each of our different life categories, the things that we're thinking about. So we've also talked about the challenges and how Reiki heals the challenges. They're called the pain points. Like, what are the pain points that each of us has? And again, that's going to be unique. All of us have a different circumstance. And so anyway, we last week we did the burning bowl ceremony, and the week before that we talked about living authentically and preparing for the burning bowl ceremony, and also the sacred water releasing ceremony. So we used both fire and water. And ultimately, what Reiki does is, even though it does the healing and the releasing in, say, a ceremony, or today when Robyn does the invocation or journey, or the guided meditations that we do, that it's going to be a process of self-discovery for each one. So then we did the burning bowl, and what that does is it brings in the energy that actually reveals who you truly are. So a lot of times we think of Reiki in the context of healing. Remember, it also reveals who you really are. And it does that by healing the layers that hide you from you and empowering you with that inner knowledge, inner awareness, confidence, self-understanding. And to me, one of the main things is that it helps you hear yourself, helps you see yourself, and helps you to know yourself. And from that perspective, then that makes it so much easier to live authentically. So we are, today we were going to be talking about your authentic voice. I think that's a big one for a lot of us. And what does that even mean? What is your authentic voice? One of the first things that I've really discovered in working with authentic voice personally over the years on, what does that mean for me? But then also teaching it for years. It's definitely part of what we teach in all of our work, is how does Reiki help you access the authenticity of your voice? The first piece of it that is usually could even be a limitation in discovering it is that the first step is that it's your voice for you. Because the first step is for you to hear you. How you express that is where choice comes in. And so I think for myself, I had to learn, because I had a fear of using my voice and what that meant, because of all different reasons, childhood, being a woman in my generation, just life itself, my own, what I brought with me into this lifetime, all different reasons that I would say I had to understand what my voice was about for me. And one of the big pieces of it was also invisibility. So getting comfortable being visible and using my voice. Once I realized that, first of all, it was about me hearing me and me becoming visible to myself, then what happened is I realized that how I express that is where choice comes in. You get to decide how you want to use your voice, when and how you want to be visible, to who, to what, and you get to have the discernment about what that means for you authentically. So it was a huge relief for me when I realized, wait, this isn't like finding my voice wasn't about what I say to others. Eventually it comes to that. And, here I am. I do speak to others. But it was first so I could hear me. And then once I got there, how I speak to others, when I speak to others, what I speak to others is where choice comes in. And it's all up to me. I get to do that exactly how I want and when I want. And that's true for each of you. Again, take it back to your unique path. What is your voice in your unique path? What is your voice in these life categories? Spiritually, what is your voice personally? What is your voice in your relationships? What is your voice in your, say, business or work life, your home life, all these different things that you get to choose how and when and where you express yourself. I just had a conversation with a person this morning about she had had a conflict with another person months ago. This has been a while. And in the conflict with the other person, she was going to see the other person and was going through her mind like we do, what am I going to say? How am I going to say it? Then she'll say this, and I'll say this, and how we can do that. And what I said was, what? You're really not responsible for engaging in that person's moment of using their voice. Like, you get to decide. You don't have to correct them. You don't have to change their mind. You don't have to fix what they say. You get to choose. Am I going to do that? Am I going to engage in it or not? And so the next place that this all took me, and I really want to do a whole week on the subject, so we'll probably come back to it, was opinions. I did a whole long thing. That's why I say it's too long to talk about right now. But so we'll probably come back and talk about it maybe even next week. But healing my opinions changed everything. It gave me freedom. I don't have to express my opinions. I don't even have to have them. I have them where I need them, where they're relevant to me. And here's the other piece of them, is where they are authentically mine. So I wrote an article about it called Reiki Heals Opinions. And what that does was Reiki energy came in to help me discern, is the opinion even one I have? Where did it come from? Was it one that I was raised with? Was it my parents' opinion? Was it something that was my culturally created self, my generation, my gender? Was it something that was actually even real or true or just a belief? And so when I started working with Reiki, it helped me have the discernment to ask some of those questions, because I actually kind of prided myself on being opinionated and sharing them. And so when I started to look at where did they come from, and then, does it make a difference Does having the opinion, am I going to do something with it, not do something with it, or am I just saying it? Am I just repeating an opinion I heard that I liked without really deep diving into it and finding out, some critical thinking about it? And so social media, of course, immediately comes to mind, because this is the big place where global communication at this level is in its infancy. And so what I decided I could do about contributing with social media is to really focus on where what I engage with social media, we do as a team. It's Danny does so much of our social media, Robyn and Shelby, and I do our team stuff. And of course, Robyn is really good at it too. But where do we make a difference? And voicing my opinion, using my voice in that arena, is to be clear about, is that where I want to use my voice? Is that what's authentic to me? So with all of it comes back to listening to your own voice and getting to the authenticity of your voice. So then we go to the next step of, what are the tools you have to help with the discernment about your voice, understanding it for you, the discernment of how or if you want to share it. The comfort in becoming visible, because that was the next big piece for me, was, I definitely have had to heal parts of me wanting to be invisible. Like, but we always laugh because our dogs would look, and if they look this way, they would act like if they're not looking at us, we can't see them. And so we laugh about that and think of, if I'm not looking, I don't see it, or you can't see me. And so it comes back to that visibility piece of it. Once I realized that the visibility was for me to see me, then I had a choice in how I was visible outside of my own self and self-awareness, and how I wanted to be visible to others, if I wanted to be visible to others, where and when, and what my choices were. So I will admit, authentic voice for me has been a lifetime journey of discovery. I was and wasn't able to express myself well as a child. In some cases, completely able to express and give an expression, and then in other cases, still the children are meant to be seen and not heard, and often not really seen either. It's like, no, go outside and come back at dark. So, which worked for me. I loved it that way. But anyway, so I've been talking this whole time. Robyn or Danny, do either of you have anything you want to add to what we've been talking about?
Well, I think that it's, what's interesting is that it's always, it's partly two different cycles and seasons of your life, right? Because we're different ages, we're different generations. And so the pieces that I go through and what you go through, because of our different generations and our different ages, currently, is always a different journey. I agree with you about the opinions, and I went ahead and put that in, not next week, but the week after, where we could switch it up. But I agree with it, because that has been a really helpful teaching as well that you have helped me with, and the discernment around that. And but we'll get into that later. But I do think that this voice is something that so many of us struggle with. And for me, it was, I mean, I think that the big part of the authenticity is releasing the culturally created self, regardless of how that looks, regardless of what your age is, regardless of what your generation is. For me, it was, being raised in this generation of, you go to college and you go into corporate America, and I'm a millennial, and you go into corporate America, and so many millennials are like, wait, we did that, wait, and going into our own identity and our authentic identity outside of what we were taught in our generation. And that's, your generation has the same process and different issues, right? And we're lucky enough that we were able to discover parts of that, with parts of that at a younger age probably than your generation is. And so your generation is visiting that at maybe 50, where ours was able to kind of visit that closer to 30, and in our mid to late 20s. And so, and then, getting into the places where we then become parents, and what that authenticity looks like in that. So, and then of course we have Gen X that has the same things of where they're going through finding their authentic voice through their generational pieces. And then, below me, Gen Z. And then, so I just think that that's another piece of it, and a really big piece for me that was a part of my journey. And it sounds like, Colleen, for you too, of that being seen and not heard. I think for the most part, although my generation was on the cusp of that, we didn't have to deal with that piece of it as much, like as your generation. But we did have our own parts of our culturally created self, whether that's from our familial, generationally, but then also the overall culture. And then once you come through that process, and I know for me, like that was such a big piece. I got out of college, entered corporate America, and went, wait a second. I hate this. This is not who I am. This is not for me. And then had to kind of find my own path, in which then eventually led me to this. And that's not everybody. Some people love that path. And so it's not saying that there's a right or a wrong. It's saying that there are a lot of people that identify with that, in these spaces. And then having to go into the space, and you talked a little bit about this, of that spirituality, Reiki space, and how we use our voice for that, and that invisibility around that. So many of us, that's such a big hurdle for us to kind of overcome in the beginning of this journey with Reiki, is the invisibility of the fact that we are Reiki masters or Reiki practitioners. This is our path. And so many of us have to, kind of journey down that path as well. And it can extrapolate to family, immediate family, extended family, friends and family. Then you can go into your community, that you can't or don't want to let people know that this is who you are, and what you're doing. And you have to journey along that path and that process. And that what Reiki is doing all this time is that it is, that Reiki is doing all this time is that it's bringing us more and more to our authentic self, and more to wellness. We hear those terms all the time. And what, like you said, what does that mean? And that wellness, that authentic self, is a part of wellness, that we are living in more and more of our truth. And yeah, thank you. Diana put in the chat that gender can play a role in it, as well as, I talked about age and generation. Gender can play a role. ethnicity, culture, race, all of those can play a role in finding our authentic self, and these culturally created selves that we have to process through and work through, coming more and more to what our authentic voice is in this process, and that how much that is all a part of this, and that it can be a really fast moving train. We can come out of a Reiki class and our lives are changed, and we are, it's like this big, it's this big transition from before Reiki and after Reiki, just even in a Reiki 1 and 2 class, or even sometimes a Reiki session. And then other times it's a slower process of releasing kind of these layers that have hidden our authentic self from us, that it is over time, and that it's a little bit of a slower process. And maybe we don't even recognize it quite as much as that, like, that start before and after, right? And then we look back and we go, oh, I am a different person today than I was a year ago, let alone, 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And looking back at that process. And I know that is something that we tend to do in our classes, is spend that time in reflection, because sometimes we don't even realize it until we have a space for us to go into that reflection, to look at who we were, who we're becoming, and even where we want to go. That intention of living more and more in our authenticity, living more and more in our authenticity is a place that we want to go. And sometimes we don't even know what that means, right? Sometimes we just set that intention and we don't quite know what that means yet. And we just kind of take that one next highlighted step, or that one next step. And then other times we know exactly what that means, and it's just a process of getting there. And the good thing is that sometimes you, like I just said, sometimes you know, and sometimes you don't know, and that's okay. But what you can do is set that intention through Reiki, and Reiki just, it can kind of take care of it. Whether or not it's like, oh, that is related exactly to my intention of that authentic voice. And other times it's not quite so clear, but we have these insights, we have these moments, we have these even life things that happen to us, so that in the long run, we're moving more and more into our authentic self. And I will say too, that that's another piece that can happen. We can have challenging life events that move us more and more into our authentic voice. It's not always this easy process of uncovering and discovering and realizing, like, oh, that's my authentic voice, and this is who I am now. Sometimes it's very challenging things that happen that move us into our inner authority, and us hearing us, right? As Colleen said, that's the first step into our inner authority and into our inner voice, whatever that looks like for us. And I will say that I know, having gone through these challenges, I think so many of us do. It's not, unique to me. But having gone through some of these recently, of especially with maybe certain people or certain parts of us, with all of this, that there are people that directly challenge our authentic voice, and having to go through that process of that challenge in order to kind of come out the other side and be more in our authentic voice and more in our own inner truth and our own inner authority. I think that's another process that so many people and so many of us kind of walk through, and we hope that it's with grace and ease and easy. But a lot of the times it's not. A lot of times there is those kind of hurdles that we have to go over. And then when we come through and go over them, we are standing more and more in our authentic voice. And like I said, sometimes those are people. And other times it might be, let's say you want to, express to your small town rural community that you are a Reiki master and this is what you stand in, this is your truth, and there's that hurdle to overcome. So there's, these different types of scenarios that can force the issue of us standing more and more in our authentic voice. And to me, while it can be challenging, it's also a really beautiful process that we come out stronger for. And Reiki knows that. And I'm so glad that we have these communities that we do get to use our authentic voice, talk about these things. If you were in our Q&A this last week or listened to it, some of the things that we get to talk about in these circles is really helpful, that we do have a place that we can talk about these subjects in. But, Reiki and these processes know that we're strong enough to come out the other side and be standing more in our truth, be standing more in our power, be standing more in our authentic self, and authenticity and authentic voice, because we did go through it. And, it's going to continue to happen our whole life, right? But having gone through something like this recently, I can say, although it was challenging at the time, I'm very glad for it. And I was strong enough to get through it. And I'm so glad I went through it with Reiki, because watching that difference of even myself from 10, 15 years ago, going through a similar process, to going through that with the Reiki energy community, sessions, classes, ceremonies, all of those kinds of things that we have to support us. It's such a big difference. You go through it with such more consciousness, awareness. You go through it with this support of Reiki, of the enlightened energy, of spirit guides, to help us navigate it, with love and compassion. And those have authority too. It's not to say that it's all just, oh, I'm going through it with so much niceness and, passiveness. No, love and compassion also have authority within it. And so it's like, even though we go through these challenges, whether with Reiki, with these tools, with these things, it doesn't mean that everything is fixed and okay in our lives. It means that we have tools and we have this enlightened energy to help support us through it. And we do come out the other side in our more empowered self, in our more authentic self, and with our voice and that throat chakra and our inner truth more visible to us and more visible to the outside world.
Well, thank you. So I think what I'd like to do too is, Laura, I see your question on some of the specifics that we can deal with, some of the challenges that we can deal with our authentic voice. Fear of judgment, that can be a very big one. How others will perceive you. And even when you think about hearing yourself, self-judgment can be in that category too. Like really getting to know you and what is unique to you, who you are, developing your own beliefs, your own inner knowing. And sometimes that challenges beliefs that you've previously had. Vulnerability in expressing yourself, feeling vulnerable when you share something genuine about you, and trusting in who you're sharing with. Again, you can apply that to yourself. Sometimes you can be misunderstood. And that can be one of the challenging aspects, or perhaps you have experienced being misunderstood or not heard in your life, or sometimes maybe you're shy and it's difficult to find your words, how you want to say things, or even finding people who listen to you long enough for you to be able to say what it is you're trying to say and get to that. There can be the social pressure of conforming to social beliefs, experiences, communities that you belong with, and expressing yourself authentically if that's different than, say, where you are, and the communities or the people you're engaging with, the culture you're in. There can be your own internal conflict, self-doubt, internal conflict about whether you want to express yourself. Again, that kind of goes back to that visibility. And for me, all of these things came back to understanding that the first step was for me to hear me, and then I had a choice in how I experienced it with others. You can experience limited acceptance by others when you use your voice and what you truly and authentically want to say. It can be professional risks. So your work, like, do you really talk about what you do, what you believe, who you are? To me, not really. I can't hear because this is my work, and in these circles we can all say the things we say, but in some settings, it's definitely better to just not speak of it. There can be your own consistency in understanding who you are consistently and what that means, and getting to develop your authentic self. You can have emotional exhaustion from having to explain yourself, having to be heard, feeling like it's difficult to use your voice, navigating through everything that can entail. And then balancing your honesty with diplomacy. So is it important to say what you need to say or want to say? And is it going to help? And for myself, there are just playing a lot of settings that I look at it as it's not my responsibility to say everything I think or what I think differently than another person, change their mind. Some of it, of course, I have my very definite boundaries. So this is not without boundaries, and I'm not being a doormat with it. It's a decision I'm making. I get to have the freedom to choose when I speak, what I speak about, what is true for me, and whether I'm not going to speak about it in that setting. And I just don't need to. I don't need to change somebody's mind. I'm not going to change their mind. So not going to spend my energy on it. I love the term that I hear a lot. It doesn't live rent free in my head. That I have to have something going on with somebody else, and it occupies my brain. So then I want to take it, and then we're going to go into the guided meditation next, but I want to take it from here to some specifics about Reiki. So, we all have Reiki at different levels, and some may not even have Reiki attunements at all. And you can still receive that Reiki energy. There's, to me, yes, do I have specific symbols and energies that I might work with some of these topics, but they all work. So let me give that caveat. And the way you need to use them in any given moment, your way, works for you. So that's step one. But if you look at the power symbol, the one that's a spiral, CKR, right? Yeah, I always forget the acronym. So CKR, that's the one that's going to come in and lift the injuries from you that have caused the layers that affect your voice. The reasons that maybe you have things that hide your voice from your own view. So it lets go. It'll help release cords, connectors, attachments, things like that to you, burdens that you've carried, things that don't belong to you. And it can do that without you knowing what those are. So that's part of its nature, is it releases things. It can release things in your home, in your space. Like you can draw that symbol, or you can say that symbol, or you can invite just Reiki energy to clear your space. So you're not in the thick of all the thought forms going around either. And then that symbol also brings in, it empowers, it does both at the same time. So it's going to let go of things that hide you from you, and it's going to come in and empower that authentic self that's within you. And it does it at the core of your being, and it really reveals who you actually are. So I'm just going to go through some of the symbols quickly because they all work. But I also want to bring your attention to the mental emotional symbol. That's all communications. Communicating with self. It brings in your authentic mind, bringing in your authentic knowledge, your wisdom, your knowing, your inner truth. It awakens your inner authority. Some of the Karuna symbols really engage in this topic. So some of those Karuna symbols are going to go in and do this too, like Zonar and Halu, for instance. They come in and release things from you. And then Nosa and Iava bring back your personal power, bring back your authentic intellect, and that all goes with your voice. But then we go to the distance symbol, and a lot of times people think the distance symbol is just for distance healing, but actually what it is the bridge of light into the depth of you, and it'll take you right into your own soul's knowledge, your own gut knowledge, your heart knowledge, your brain. It's like it works together to align all of you. And so, the Usui master symbol, bringing in the authentic truth of the earth and your body, that your body has knowledge, your whole system has knowledge. All of these can release, let go, and bring in your empowered self as well. So use the symbols however it works for you in whatever moment you need it. You can think them, you can draw them, you can meditate with them. You can do that in seconds, or you can do that in hours. Whatever you have time for, the Reiki energy will really help you, because the first discovery is your voice for you. Your first discovery is how you hear you, how you see you outside of society's expectations, anyone else's authority, getting to your own authority, what your truth is. And then remembering how you share that in the world is really up to you. That's where choice comes in, that you get to decide. And sometimes there's plenty of times I'm like, yeah, I'm just not engaging. I don't have to. I'm not going to. I can't be effective there. And so I don't need to. I'm not responsible. So anyway, I know we are getting to the end of time for Robyn to go ahead and do some Reiki for us that does this for us, and we get to just open our hearts and receive. So
yeah,
we'll go into breakout rooms after that.
We just wanted to quickly announce that we have Animal Reiki 1 and 2 and Animal Reiki next week online with Colleen, myself, and Sue. And then Colleen and I have Human Reiki 1 and 2. She has Human Reiki Master and Karuna Reiki Master in February. So go to ReikiLifestyle.com to find the dates and register and learn more about those classes. All right.
Thank you for remembering that. The master class in February, I'm co-teaching with Sue Machado from Brazil. It'll be in English, but she's going to be in Brazil and I'm going to be here, and we're going to co-teach it together. So anyway, go ahead, Robyn.
Thank you, everyone.